Why,
Morning.
Curt Doolittle, of
Morning.
all the coffee joints in all the world, here
I
we
get to
meet.
share it with Dr. Brad Merle. I'm so lucky. And my beard is coming, is gonna
Oh,
hopefully my beard will
nicely.
come back.
Very
But I'm
nice.
a big fat fuck right now. I just can't stand it. I gotta lose the
Oh
weight.
my.
God damn, I feel like Cartman at South Park, right? It's because I'm not tall, right? I'm 5'7". So you had 25 pounds on me, and I look like a I look like a watermelon with toothpick legs. It's just
There
fucking
you go.
awful.
Not good.
Anyway, so
We were just having a little chat, you and I,
yes,
and I wanted to bring it to the public attention because it was quite an interesting discourse on Viking ethics.
yes. Well, so you know how I always start with the first principle. Why don't we suicide, right? Because
The evil questions, the rough questions.
right, and then the one is, why don't I kill you and take your stuff? Well, then it was, why don't me and mine kill you and yours and take your stuff, right? Right. So those are the first I have. There's five, but I won't go into all of them. So um, so when you say, when you get back, if you answer those questions, you end up with it. You want to survive, and why do you want to survive? Because you want the opportunity for persistence, which is the human desire, life desire, and it's pretty hard to defeat that. If the reason we don't kill each other and take our stuff is it's actually cheaper to cooperate and safer, right? It's a lot safer actually because we're super predators. And why don't groups of us kill each other and take each other's stuff more often than we do? Because it's really fucking dangerous, right? And the benefit, and it turns out that what we've learned over time is the benefits of trade vastly outweigh the benefits of taking stuff, because you trade constantly, but you can only you can only steal so much before there's no or kill so much before there's nobody left to kill and steal. So the Viking ethics are pretty much like this, and I use them to contrast with other civilizations. Now, I forgot one point. So the other point is that the problem for for civilizations to go from I want to survive to I don't kill each other and take your stuff, and don't groups of us kill each other and take each other's stuff, is that to get to that point, you need an economy that makes it unnecessary, right? So that's the whole point: is peace results from development. Right? And then controlling your reproduction, and then not having too many people. Like, what are all the people to the east of the Persians, right? And then the people to the north, you've always got some goddamn tribe coming in and trying to kill you. But anyway, so getting on to the Vikings, she says, that's Brad's eyes are telling me, yeah, well, I asked you a fucking question. Why don't you answer the goddamn question?
That was not right.
I want your fucking question about Vikings. So so the Viking ethics is very simple. Killing and taking your stuff is really good, but I only get to do it once. Raiding and asking for basically money, right? Or pillaging, but not killing you, I can do that every year, right? That's like farming.
We would just do the rotating crop of people that you're just
Right. And
taking
it's
this.
like, well, this crop didn't grow enough stuff to, this bunch of people didn't grow enough stuff, so we can't go rob them again yet. We got to wait till they have more stuff again before we can go rob them. And then, of course, the third one, the last thing is, but it turns out, so you can kill people and take their stuff. You can rob people and take their stuff, or you can trade with them. And it turns out the Vikings were smart. They're like, it's just more profitable to trade.
It's a pragmatic determination. We proved it.
and you
It's
and
like the Swedes have been plastered for 500 years.
right, so they created, we always think of the world through the Atlantic lens, right? But they created that network down through Ukraine into the Ottomans, right? The Ottoman territories. So, or the Byzantine area, sorry. So they created that trade route, and along that trade route, they developed what's today Russia and Ukraine, whatever. So they built those cities there. But their ethic was pretty clear. I mean, it was extremely pragmatic. There's no higher reason to it at all. It's just what's profitable. And so, Viking ship is on the water is equivalent to a horse on land, right? I mean, it was a huge
Oh yeah,
strategic difference in, so they
shallow
made
draft boats that can go anywhere.
anywhere, and then you can pick them up even, so and carry them if you have to. Anyway, so I was contrasting that with other civilizations who I won't mention, who ask a different question. Now, so in my ethic is very close to the Viking ethic, which is why I understand it very well. Which is it's nothing is ever off the table, right? I mean, that's the whole,
That's right.
so it's only off the table if you're weak and you're afraid, right? But if you're not weak and afraid, then it's never off the table, right? Sort of like the girl women thing right there. Violence is off the table because they're not very good at it, so they want you to keep violence off the table, but they don't keep undermining off the table, right? And so things get out of hand once in a while. So anyway, so other cultures don't have this reciprocity and pragmatism to them. So what happens in the Viking model is externalities matter.
Right.
And so what happens in in the Germanic continental model is externalities matter. It's not just this trade. It's that I don't want to provoke hostility from you that would end up you saying, it's cheaper to kill them and take their stuff.
Time to take them to task. That's interesting. So this interesting mode of construction, because it's like externalities matter, which is we're accounting for externalities, which is over time instead of in time.
Correct. Over time, in time. So male systematizing versus female empathizing. So in the Middle East, there's this tribal problem, right? There's a lot of tribes. Everybody doesn't trust anybody else. They're constantly, infighting, right? And there's always a new dictator coming along with an army to kill everybody else and put you under the. So I mean, you do this in-groupism, which is extreme familism, which means you don't ever develop the ethic of reciprocity. You only develop the ethic of volition, voluntarism. So it just has to be voluntary. In other words, if I can get you to do something, the externalities don't matter. Moreover, if you look at Middle Eastern ethics, one of the reasons they can't make productivity is that if you and I do a deal this time, everybody at every step in the transaction is trying to take advantage of it. So the next deal isn't cheaper. Then the next deal isn't cheaper. There's always something going this. They call this haggling culture, right? But that's where it comes from. There's never a system of trust developed that is efficient, that produces volume instead of trying to maximize each operation. So the problem you get in the writing in the Middle East is this ethic of voluntarism, which is why I make fun of libertarians, because I don't use I use reciprocity, which is a higher standard, which is fully informed, productive, fully informed, warranted, voluntary transfer of demonstrated interests, free of imposition of cost upon the demonstrated interests of others by externality. That's the only way you remove all incentives. There's no possible incentive now for me for someone to retaliate. But in the Middle East, they don't do that. Use voluntarism. And so once you realize that whole ethical structures are now built on the virtue of the interpersonal transaction instead of the virtue of the transaction that benefits the commons. So you'll see this in any Middle Eastern culture, and especially the one you don't want me to mention. Is that they have their law says it's okay as long as it's voluntary. But it doesn't have the concept of equality, and it doesn't have the concept of reciprocity. It only has the concept of voluntary, because they're trying. This is why their whole civilization develops into baitings into hazard, because baiting to hazard is the most profitable thing under voluntarism, and baiting to hazard is prohibited under reciprocity. Yet these people will go and talk about how their morality is the best, right, Edward?
Right.
And that's nonsense. It's very just,
But
it's just
we would call it misrepresentation. I would say is it
yeah, I would call it that.
nonsense is another word for such.
Well, it's but now let's make it really fun and say, well, women empathize because they can't systematize.
Okay.
Right, that's important. So why would we expect? Why do you expect women to systematize?
That sounds like foolishness too.
It sounds like foolishness. Well, if you have a culture that's developed a feminine trade system, right, like this, which is their ethic is basically female, then why would you develop a
Right, because it's like the worst that can come of it, of the feminine trading system, is they're going to call you names later.
and they're not going to want to play games with you, right? But if you're in a densely populated area with an infinite base of customers, nobody gives a shit. Or if you're selling something like monetary exchange, which people can't do without, then they don't have a lot of choice. They just go to the same guy who does the same thing. So all the guys who change money take the same attitude, which is maximization of each individual transaction, regardless of its impact on the commons. Which turns out, if you get a group of people to do that, it's really, really profitable because that develops into baiting into hazards. And baiting into hazards, which is anything with asymmetric risk, is going to be extremely profitable for you because then what you do is you become specialized in marginal cases so that you make your base revenue out of proper cases and you make your windfall profits out of outliers, but then you can't be criticized. You have plausible deniability for handling those outliers to say, well, I mean, it was voluntary. I did the job and he didn't pay me back, so I seized his house and his cows and his chickens and all the other stuff. And all of a sudden what happens is you get a group of people who aren't allowed to own property because that's how they use their trading into hazard, is to steal property through
Baiting into hazard.
desperate, through baiting into hazard by desperate lending. So if you understand, it's very interesting once you turn this into a science or a form of logic, cooperation, how easy it is to explain things and how clear things are versus when you're always used to saying, well, that's not right, that's not good, and you don't know why. You can't break it down into its constituent parts, right? So it's just kind of interesting how specialized, if you develop this particular skill in ethics, which you can understand it, you have a standard of weight and measure, how you could decompose everybody's ethical system by just asking a set of questions.
Which set of questions are those?
Well, you have to figure out, you go through it, it says this is what reciprocity would consist of. So what you do is just test every property of reciprocity. So is it required to be productive? Well, not for libertarians, no. Is it required to be fully informed? Well, not for libertarians, no. Does it have to be warranted? Well, no, not for libertarians, no. Is it got to be voluntary? Well, yes. And has it got to be free of externality? No. So, I mean, it's voluntarism. Well, they're right, it's voluntarism, but voluntarism isn't reciprocity. Voluntary is a lower standard of it. Well, where did libertarian ethics come from? It came from the ethics of the Jewish ethics of the Pale. That's where Rothbard came from. So, I mean, and so we know what Jewish ethics are. We know what they consist of. Now we have to go back and say, okay, well, if that's where that came from, how did it get constructed? And you just look back at, I just read the Jewish law, right? I mean, it's three different sort of versions, and it's incredibly good stuff. I mean, it's well thought out, right? But it's not reciprocal. It's especially designed to treat others as less, so that you don't have reciprocity. You only have voluntarism. So whenever a libertarian says something about voluntarism, I just want to slap him in the face for being an ignorant moron. But it's actually one of those things that's a subtle enough half-truth that
confusing to many.
Right. So this is the other thing that happens with the female method of negotiation is women seduce by by storytelling, right? It's like when I can tell Eric Weinstein is going to say something bullshit is when he starts on an arc, right? A narrative arc. Like I use my narrative arc to falsify the fact that they create narrative arcs to lie by suggestion, right? It's just the difference is their narrative arc is reasonableness. My narrative arc is truth and reciprocity.
Right. Reasonableness. Now I call that the liberals. It's a liberal establishment or liberal settlement.
Right.
So reasonable is a liberal standard.
Right. It's the same thing with postmodernism. They're trying to destroy truth so that they say there's no logic. What they mean is when they say there's no grand narratives, there's no logic to it, is what they're really saying. And there's only power. There's no truth, there's no logic, there's only power. And so why are they doing that? Because then they can use they can deal with empathy, reasonable suggestion, and deceit instead of truth and reciprocity. And
it's a form of denial of truth and reciprocity.
Yes, it's just very and they wrap it in such a great story. I mean, I run into people every day. They're like, "Well, the postmodernists are saying this." You're a fucking idiot. Of course they're saying that. Why are they saying that?
It's self-evident. They want power.
Well, I mean, and they blame it on Nietzsche, and I'm like, Nietzsche failed to solve the problem. They say Nietzsche's the first postmodernist, right? This is the whole.
Oh, I have not heard this.
So, because his will to power, right? I mean.
Oh yeah.
But he basically makes the argument against morality, and I'm like, well, no, dear Nietzsche, you just failed. He understood correctly the problem of the Greeks, right? He wrote his first book, which is The Twilight of the Idols. All right. No. Anyway, it's the one about Greek religion anyway. Why don't I feel that? Why is that escaping me at the moment? Nietzsche's first book. The Birth of Tragedy. Thank you. The Birth of Tragedy. So I was like, I know that's wrong. Why is that sticking in my head? So the Birth of Tragedy. He's basically this is where he gets his idea from. Is this basic understanding of, oh, I see how Greeks were practicing religion, right? And it is come in their plays and all this other stuff. Right? And so he began to understand the ancient ethic by this versus the Christian. And so he's trying to bring that back. But of course, like he failed to solve the problem, and that's okay. He just failed to solve the problem. But they think that he took it, and the postmodernists took it as there is no morality, there is no. It's all power.
Failed to solve the problem.
I mean, there's no morality if you don't want to cooperate, but then you lose the gains of cooperation. So I would just phrase it differently: is morality only exists between people who wish to cooperate.
Yes.
It's otherwise there's no moral question, because all morality means is the rules of cooperation.
Well, so we would discuss this. I like this in this context, which is morality is the rules of cooperation over some time frame.
Yes, and some populations.
And so when we talk about in time, is voluntarism is sufficient as a form of cooperation in time.
Correct.
But it's not over time, because I can't do business with you because you took advantage of me the last 2 times, and that's not acceptable. So I can't do business with you.
So this is why you have a low trust society, right? Which is why we have a high trust society, because we use reciprocity. Right. So,
very good.
The problem they have is that diversity is the cause of the original problem. Whereas we had relative homogeneity. We produced relative homogeneity. And we didn't unify such that we were totalitarian as an empire, right? So we had this pretty interesting period of, we tried to make an empire. It lasted quite a while, produced some goods, but it basically failed. And then the ethics still maintained in Europe, and we ended up with what you'd expect to end up, which is many small states, which is basically a reflection of tribes with their own governments, but they have a common ethic. It's reasonably common ethic. So
Right.
we developed high trust, and the Middle East never did. And they developed facelessness, which is it's not like we have truth before face. The East Asians have face before truth, and the Middle East has facelessness, which is that it's heroic to lie, cheat, and steal and get away with corruption. It's heroic on sort of your family, and that's the way the African model is too. I mean, it was. It's hard to. I mean, the things are changing in Africa so fast now that I can only describe things that were really true up until 1980, because since 1980, I'm not really sure what's going on other than what I can learn about as the internet goes through the economies.
Oh, right, and revs it all up and stirs the
I
pot.
can't judge anything, but they have Africa still has a low trust society, and they're going to have a harder time with it because they have more diversity, which is why, it's just, I mean, reproductively, why neoteny was problematic in Africa is there's just too many people, so there's no isolation event. After we had the isolation event that created modern humans, right? There's no opportunity, that spread so fast. There's been no opportunity for a subsequent isolation event in Africa. So, whereas as we spread out across the rest of the planet, there were opportunities for the Mesopotamian, Persian Gulf, whatever, Levant, that speciation event, the Tibetan speciation event, I guess, or something like that area that created the East Asians, and the European speciation event that created the Europeans. And the fourth one is apparently lost to us, but it's the ancient North Eurasian. It was a hybridization of Europeans, very, very top of the Ice Age, Paleolithic Eastern hunter-gatherers, and or at least North Eurasian hunter-gatherers with East Asian hunter-gatherers. There seems to be that, and out of that we get we get the blonde hair and some other things and big size, but we also get the Amerindians on one end, and it goes back intrinsically through reproduction very aggressively into Europe. So it was something good that happened there too. We get the Scandinavians, Eastern European hunter-gatherers, Scandinavian hunter-gatherers, Western European hunter-gatherers, sort of like columns. Fairly fascinating. If you look, I mean, the evolution of man from these perspectives is just absolutely fascinating. Until some churchy person on Twitter says that there's no such thing as evolution, or some churchy person tells you that there are nobody's ever seen speciation. And I'm like, we do it. I can put a bunch of bacteria, and I can put in both sides in some sugar water or whatever, and I can put a stream of antibiotics in them between them, and I can watch as they mutate to defeat the antibiotic. It's not complicated, right? We do it. It's how we do things. It's like an industrial process for us,
right?
Or speciation. The big frame one is this: the lingering belief that it matters if you can't interbreed. Well, that's not true. What speciation is caused by some difference that causes different preference and selection, which continues over time to express
right
phenotypic morphological changes, right, and behavioral changes, right. So that's what speciation is. So baboon, chimpanzees, and what are the other one, bonobos, they can reproduce just fine, right. Humans, because we're extremely sexually plastic, and it hasn't been that long, we can interbreed between the races, but they're really species, right? They're speciation events because they're local adaptation to the circumstance. Four different circumstances allowed for 4 different speciation events, and 5 whatever, and it's pretty obvious what happened. So but the people who believe that that's the case will try to tell you that they're, I mean, the amount of stupid shit people come up with is just fucking beyond me. Just beyond me. Anyway.
It's the immense human creative mind at work.
Yeah, but why defend? It's like, how can you testify that? I mean, is it observable, whatever, can you show it? No. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, it's one thing. It's like, we can't disprove God, right?
That's correct.
Right. And even if we did disproved the God, the most powerful God, we still end up with we act like there's gods. so therefore there are gods.
Must be.
I mean, along the spectrum, there's and you can't say that there isn't an effect of everybody believing in the same God, because that's actually what causes the effect. So I mean, I'm like, okay, well, there may not be gods that are all powerful or whatever in your particular point of view, but you can't say that the gods we pray to don't have the consequences that we some of the consequences we attribute to them, right? So I don't know. I mean, just anyway, I'm ranting now because I'm just in a mode of continuous exasperation. But anyway, so
continuous exasperation. I want to ask you about that. Why are you in a state of continuous exasperation?
You're not even drinking, and you're not drinking.
I'm drinking coffee, sir. Because it's like this, it's so close to a word we use in medicine, exacerbation.
Exacerbation, yeah, that's right.
And so they're filed right next to each other.
Yeah. So that's
like,
I completely get that.
I couldn't tease it apart fast enough.
So there with you.
That was hard.
So there with you.
So why are you in a continuous state of exasperation? It's like you're in some form of denial. Is what it comes down to. You're trying to deny that reality, which
I am. I'm trying to I'm probably trying to deny that the reality of what humans are really like, because I actually can't stand it.
You can't stand its existence.
Well, it's more like I can't stand having to deal with it, right?
So okay, this is the avenue, this is the loose tile. It's like you can't stand having to deal with it. Why do you have to deal with it?
Because it's like they're children. They run into the room where adults are having a conversation, and you have no way of getting them out of the conversation. It's really exasperating.
Right, it's childish behavior. There's no question about it.
Right,
and it's okay. So, but the issue is that you're treating them like adults is the problem.
No, I'm wishing they were adults.
Oh my. What's really funny about it is that the adult, they think themselves to be adults and wish to act as adults with their childlike utterances, right? So I think that you have to just call them childish and be done with them. And then you're not exasperated. You're just dispensing with them neatly and cleanly.
That all works when it's like the middle of the day and whatever, but you get there till 8 o'clock at night and you're tired.
That's when you pull the bridges up. You just pull the bridges up and you're done. You shut down their potential for leaking into the room.
Jesus, you just want to,
it's about controlling access to the your consciousness.
Yeah, it's controlling access to peace of mind. Anyway, so I get very frustrated, and a part of it is because the real answer is that it makes me believe our work is hopeless.
See, that's not acceptable.
Right? No, but I just didn't say that because I knew you'd say that. All right, so I decided I might as well get it out there.
Might as well try it
and see if I can get Brad to correct me, which often happens.
Which must happen. That's what I'm here for. Keep Curt in lane. Don't let these people bother you. Get to work.
But it just makes me feel like it's hopeless.
But
I can't feel like that because it's too much work.
Right.
I have too much work to do for me to believe it's hopeless.
That's right. So it's like this. It's like the I have to perish the thought, extinguish the notion as quickly as possible so that you can continue your productive work, which is essential if it's not to be hopeless.
Yeah, I need like a little Brad Jiminy Cricket. Isn't it Jiminy Cricket that sits on your shoulder?
Yeah.
And except what is he trying to do? He's trying to make you be moral. I can't remember what Jiminy Cricket does. He's like trying to make you do the right thing. Or like you have the good angel and the bad angel.
Yeah.
My bad angel, he doesn't get my good angel must go to sleep pretty often because my bad angel likes to tell me bad stories when I'm tired.
Maybe you should go to sleep when the bad angel's talking, man.
No, that's actually the right answer. And I feel like it's a moron because every time I get frustrated, it's because I'm tired. That's the only reason.
Oh my.
Called you last night.
So what so it's like this. It will be the issue is this is you're misinterpreting signals.
I am?
Yes, you're misinterpreting signals. It's like the bad angel is the signal to go to sleep.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So I want you to practice reinterpreting your signals, and then you can see if it doesn't achieve a better result.
All right.
Just means you're tired. When the bad angel's talking too loud, it's like it just means you need to go take a nap.
Oh, yeah, and it's like I don't want to be the negative Nancy because there's enough of those fuckers out there, and I'm like, dude, every time you whine and say it's hopeless, all you do is make it harder for us to win, right?
We're gonna win.
What?
There's no choice. We have no choice.
Dude, they are marching all. I mean, I can't remember who one of the profs said this yesterday. Is that they are marching this at the end of meritocracy through the American institutions.
Oh yeah,
with full force, and I'm like, who is doing this? We need like a federal investigation into who is trying to replace meritocracy with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The enemy.
Well, but I mean, it's everywhere.
Yes, sir. It's the party.
What?
It's the party. It's the uniparty, the imperial uniparty that is based upon baiting into hazard. That's who it is.
Okay. Now I'm gonna need a nap.
Pretty soon. Pretty soon. It is okay, but we have to chat about the dimensions of conflict. And now that we've kind of broached the subject a little bit, right? I want to discuss the dimensions of conflict.
Your mission for today. Okay. I was looking forward to this, but last night, but I forgot what it is this morning. So you have to
so that's why I'm here.
Educate me and the audience again.
Right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to we have a big problem, which is the uniparty that is unethical and baiting everybody into this extreme hazard, which is devolutionary organization of our social system for fun and profit, right? And so it's like, what are the dimensions of the conflict that we have to account for, right? And so there's a multitude of dimensions. So we can look at it like, I was thinking about it like there's a wavelength function, which is over what time frame is it working? So there's a wavelength function. So like if I look at Luke's work, he's working at this very long wavelength, right? You're working at an extremely long wavelength, which is evolutionary timescales. And it's like this, okay, but there's shorter wavelengths that are more operational and now, which is like, it goes down to the speed of a lightning strike, right? Which is immediate destructive potential. Okay. So there's a wavelength function, and it kind of looks like, it looks to me like, okay, evolutionary is on the extreme long wavelength. I'm writing it down, so forgive me. Then there's like education. Spiritual function is of a longer wavelength, right? Education is a shorter wavelength. And then direct action, so political, military. Political is a longer wavelength, so the law is in that range, right? And then you end up with militant at the other end of the most short wavelength that we are considering in a social sense. Does that make sense?
Give me the order without the descriptions again. Just give me
Sure. So from short wavelength to longest wavelength.
Yeah.
Militant, political, legal, educational, spiritual or religious, and evolutionary finally.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Yes.
So that tells us something about time of operations.
Those are the means of organizing over time, yes. And so because those means of organizing have a output, in other words, they produce outputs at longer and longer periods of time, yes. Like if you show up with 2,000 men with rifles, it tends to make things move very quickly.
So it's very fast. It's like there's going to be results soon.
Yes. If you can vote the bums out, which we don't seem to be able to, then we could change it on a little longer cycle. If we could get legislation through that would change the do the reforms that we suggested, then that would take a little longer. What was your next one? Education.
Yes.
Educate new generations. We could indoctrinate all classes with religion over generations. And we could, what was the last one after religion?
Spiritual and evolutionary.
Spiritual.
We just separate.
Well, evolutionary is just reproduction, right? And
yeah.
And spiritual is I would view as the consequence of everything else before it. So it's probably the intersection point of the arc through religion and through reproduction. Probably meets the spiritual, which is this spiritual spirit. Well, we know what spirit means. I mean, we science spirit. It means your intuition. So, yes.
Okay.
I try to tell who did I try to explain that your soul was material, and I could see the reaction in the person's face. It was funny. Didn't like it that you could science the soul.
All right.
The ancients weren't stupid, you know. They just tried. They understood. They understood categories, but they didn't understand causality. You know, and so you look back in history, and there's a lot of. It's like gravity, right? How correct was Aristotle about gravity? Not at all. But he recognized there was a thing called gravity, right? He had a theory. It was completely nuts, but I mean, by our standards, right? So things first mover and will to like it's an animistic thing. It's really silly, right? But you know, it's not that got it wrong. Soul is, we know what the soul, when we use the term soul, we know what that means, and we know what biologically it's happening and why. But you know, it's a real thing. It turns out that what you perceive exists. When you say the spirit, we know what that means. It's a thing that persists. We have a thing called the will. We experience it. We have a thing. We know what causes the will. I mean, these have scientific bases, but were the ancients really that wrong for their purposes in the way they used them? No, you know, they were pretty good. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You know, I'm not a fan. I'd rather people studied. If we forget that the Greeks came out with their stuff before all this biblical stuff happened, right? This is all late. But the Greeks came up. I'd rather people understood Greek philosophy than Semitic philosophy and Greek religion rather than Semitic religion. But that doesn't mean, but if it's the same thing is true if you study Hindu religion, if you want to call it that, or Hindu thought and Chinese thought, because I'm not sure it's philosophy either. If you try to, especially Confucian thought, there's smart stuff in everything. They're all solving for the same problem, which is how we all get along without killing each other, given that we're super predators and this world is full of scared stuff, which gives us reason to kill each other. How do we make this work? You know, they're all trying to solve that problem, and they all solve it slightly differently. And they all categorize the world somewhat differently, but we attribute the we attribute the word heaven to a lot of things the Chinese say, but there's no equivalent of heaven. It's the sky. Right. All sorts of things like that. So what's
right? Right. It's like, but it's interesting. So the Chinese philosophy is that man is an element like a fuse or like an electrical element. Okay, between two polarities, which is heaven and earth, grounded. So energy transmits down from heaven to earth, and humans are the actor in between.
Right. So they were trying to find, how do we produce harmony in a place that had our wars of religion period, which is really the period of state formation, right? They had that much earlier than we did, and it was way worse. And so they came out of all that, and they're like, harmony, right? Let's just keep harmony. Let's avoid conflict. So they have a lot of conflict avoidance in their system. And I always say, I'm not the first one to say this, but I say Confucius failed to solve the problem of politics. So he said, the political order shall be an extended family. And so he created this hierarchical family. Well, the Indians made their classes like a hierarchical military, and we made our classes as a hierarchical military. And the Middle East didn't. They made theirs as an equalitarian, what do you call it? Equalitarian priesthoods, right? A collection of tribes, right? And so there's
Right.
even the battles over which family's in control of Islam. Those are the big battle. Those are essentially battles over kingdoms, right? I mean, who's going to be king? They're essentially put in the religious context, but it's really about who's going to be king. So I mean, everybody sort of approached this. All the major civilizations, we all approach this problem slightly differently.
Right. So I'm going to go back to the question you asked, which is, who is this that's projecting this egalitarian anti
Western, I don't know.
Yeah, it's anti-Western. It's
anti-hierarchical,
it's coming from the Fertile Crescent.
All right. It's so we have the Muslims trying to do it, and they're trying to do it in the UK, and they're making pretty good progress there. They're making as good progress in the UK as the Jews have made here. And we have the Jews here. And you say, well, how can that percentage of the population? Well, if you specialize in baiting into hazard, you're going to make more money. And you're specialized in baiting hazard, making more money, and you're clannish or you're insular. And then you're going to try to do what all people do is take your insular group and press their agenda. Well, their agenda is to make the world safe for them, except that the world is safe for them is the opposite of the one they want. It's the one they have to be responsible for commons and change their whole. So, which is why I say, Israel needs to survive because the Jews need to learn how to be moral. What?
I'm not agreeing with that premise, but they don't have to do anything. I'm not going to say they're obligated to do anything.
Well, I mean, it would be. Excuse me. I would like it if they learn how to be.
That would be nice. That was a nice thing to say, Curt. So we're talking about this conflict.
Excuse me. I say that yet. I follow a bunch of rabbis who are very wise men, but they're all interpersonally wise. They're all empathically wise. They're not politically wise. And so I always find that very interesting. There is like Rabbi Daniel Laffin told me, Curt there, there's good Jews and bad Jews, and good Christians and bad Jews, bad Christians, and good Muslims and bad Muslims, and it's kind of hard to put everybody. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's true, except that there's good evolutionary strategies and there's bad evolutionary strategies, and unfortunately, if you use the female strategy, you're producing local goods at non-local costs, right? Which is really a responsibility evasion, right? Because as responsibility evasion goes, the reciprocity evasion. So I mean, that's the problem for Islam. Some Islam guy, Muslim was arguing with the other day, and I'm like, well, I mean, all those things you say are true. Islam provides you with all that mindfulness, but what's the cost of the mindfulness of Islam?
Right.
The cost of mindfulness of Islam is systemic failure. So, I mean, what's the difference between Islamic religion that creates that wonderful mindfulness for you? At what cost? Well, the cost is that you live in a primitive, low trust society that doesn't advance, evolve, or contribute to the world. Instead, that you undermine civilizations because what you're selling is essentially a drug. I know drugs are nice. I mean, I went to college too. I know drugs are nice, but eventually we have to grow up.
There you have it.
Especially,
so it's interesting. There's an
especially mushroom. I got to recommend mushroom.
Well, having been in the northwest of Pacific Northwest, that's just I understand. So it's an interesting incomplete accounting. Incomplete accounting is what we're talking about. And it's like the externalization of costs is what the problem is with our environment. We are suffering from environmental problems as a human race, and it has to do with incomplete accounting as well.
Right.
And it's like, so it's like the issue, and this is for the environmentally interested lefties, that we are interested in full accounting, which will include the environmental effects. That's what our program is selling with reciprocity, because the environment is part of the equation.
Yes.
All externalities. So we are environmentally sound and friendly, despite the fact that we will be identified as hierarchical and dangerous to those people who are on the left that are afraid of such things.
Well, the left is female, cognitively female, and they want to avoid anything that would cause an interpersonal reaction to experience stress. Right. And so they think of it as being caring. What it really is being irresponsible. It's only caring if you're bringing someone to responsibility. It's not caring if you're taking someone from responsibility. So the problem is they just hide under cover of caring. So that's one of the terms I try to bring in all the time, is they operate under the plausible deniability, and because their intentions are good. Right, that's why they.
Right, because who could have predicted that? Is how I've heard them say this thing a lot.
It's obvious. Well, it's obvious if you can systematize, but since we know empathizing is hostile to systematizing because it's a temporal division. I mean, once you realize, I said I've been off this kick for a while now, but I should get back on it. How much we're bots, how hard it is to not be a bot, and how few people are not bots, and how they're all disagreeable conservatives. There's only a few, right? It's basically a small percentage of we take this pyramid, right? The triangle, right? We forget that if you're talking about maturity, it's this way, right? There's a few men who are willing to be responsible for the system at personal cost. And that's you, that's me, that's the conservatives who weren't fascists, right? I mean, there might be fascists in there who are willing to pay the cost, right? But we're let's just say that we're more.
Fascists would be the ones that would want an empire,
right? Instead of reciprocity.
So they're less adults.
They're less adults because they have lower trust. They have lower trust because they're less trustworthy. So I say that the reason you're fascist is because you're disagreeable and you're low trustworthy, not trustworthy. Well, so you project that onto other people. Well, I mean, it's true that not everyone is trustworthy, but on the other hand, you can create a market for the suppression of mistrustable, untrustworthy people. We call that norms, traditions, and laws, right? I mean, you create that market for suppression of it. And the problem is you've got to create the legal market in order to make sure you grow the traditional and normative market for suppression. You have to be able to, you have to put some codification in place, which is where the people who wrote laws, I mean, Aristotle's a big one on this, people who understood that law or constitutions were how you program your society. Is it if it becomes law, right, and it's rigid enough, and it's not. In other words, there's a difference between a true law, a legitimate law, and an illegitimate law, which you and I, excuse me, have covered in great length because I found the video a while back.
Huh.
And there's a difference between legitimate and illegitimate law. Now, people might say legitimate law is how it's put into place. That might be one of the properties of legitimate law, but the other property of legitimate law is whether it's natural law or not. In other words, does it provide an incentive to drive people? In other words, can it produce the incentive? Right? Is it possible? And so any law that suppresses irreciprocity is possible.
Okay.
Because irreciprocity is what we all desire.
So we have
if somebody he cheats, now I got to cheat.
And we have an operational question, which is this is begging this question. See, we have this problem. We're operating at all those different time functions that we discussed moments ago.
Yes.
Okay, from a military to an evolutionary functionality. So operating in these wavelengths. And it's like we're attempting to achieve some political change, legal change, and it's like this. The issue that I have is this: we can generate an instantaneous militant function, but we cannot generate the necessary shift in consciousness to cause the people to understand the implications of what we are trying to do. And it seems to be unreasonable to ask them to accept all the changes that we might wish to impose by whatever means.
I actually don't believe that. I believe it's very hard for anybody to look at we've proposed who isn't in academy, media, or parasitic government, right? Or maybe parasitic finance. And those four places, that's not that's a quarter of the economy, but it's not 100% or 50% of the economy. So there's a bunch of people in those sectors who would probably be influenced. But the majority of the people, but those are the people who are extracting, who are immoral.
Yes.
So, I mean, I would say the 75% of people, most of them would look at our proposals and say, holy shit, this would radically change the quality of life. I mean, maybe they won't understand the economic stuff I put in there.
No, that's the issue. The issue is this is just the issue to me is there's an educational component which is necessarily slower than a militant component.
Well, that's the problem, right? That's why we say, we have the answers, right? We know we're going to eventually have to stand up and do something to get them imposed, but you have to make people agree with you. And the way you make people agree with you is just give them the information because they're going to agree with it. The problem is they need incentive to know the information. So how do we produce the incentives? They have the information. Now, our belief was that we had to publish, and then we had to go into activist mode. And there were three ways we would go into activism. We would do local participation. We would do court cases, and we would do a political, try to work within one of the political structures or create a new political party, which is the one you're suggesting, which is the not uniparty. Right, we're the not uniparty, right? Those things have a specious record, whereas taking over a broken party tends to have a better record here, which is
right. So this would be the Ron Paul thing, which is like it's better to steal a working car than to make a new car from the desert materials.
Right, exactly. So it's obvious and we know that we're coming to the end of that generation, we're running out of bodies that can persist the existing Republican nonsense, right? So it's possible to do it in the Republican Party. Otherwise, it's just we'll just create a political action committee and go after it that way.
Yes.
So I mean, there's three venues that we have: the intellectual venue, the local organizing venue, we have the legal venue, and we have the political venue. So we have four venues to which to bring this about. The whole purpose is, how do we get the solution in front of people And my view is that it has to become a threat before anybody will talk about it.
I understand you. So it's like this, it's a matter of generating incentives and have a plan that is
Yep.
understandable by everybody before they read the plan.
Yep.
Does that make sense? But what is the operation, and do they want to participate in the operation? And then the justification for the operation is the details of what will be done with what is being imposed.
Right. So we have our talking points, right? We have our
Yes.
short version, right? So that should be enough to tell people this is what you will get at. It's when you read that short version, it's very hard to do it, right? The problem is actually interesting, and that preventing lying may not be. In other words, people like lying.
Yes, they do.
Right? They not only like not only like their politicians to lie, the ones that they prefer.
Sure.
They like being lied to.
Yes.
Those people. So I view that as the hurdle, because that's the problem. So it's the hurdle. The second hurdle, of course, is that you're talking about something which anybody's in the diversity, equity, inclusion crap, right? This whole nonsense, which is basically blue cities. When you're ever into that, you're in that position, trying to say we're going to restore meritocracy for the common good, because your welfare is more dependent upon the success of the smart fraction than it is upon your individual success. Does that make sense? Your ability to do anything is dependent more on the success of your smart fraction than it is on that. And the problem is we're undermining every institution through diversity, equity, inclusion. You see it at the university pretty clearly, but I see it in business now. So,
oh yeah.
So I see it because they know they're trying to. Diversity, equity, inclusion means reduction of competition. The competition means decreasing
incompetency.
I see it all over the place, really. But the way to look at it is go listen to, like, somebody said this yesterday. Which talking head said this? Some academic, I can't remember who it was. And he says, go watch a Reagan speech, a Eisenhower speech, just go back every couple of presidents. Okay. And look at the decline in the
they we're in absolute incompetence now.
Right.
Because a party is that much successful.
Well, I mean, we're not asking people to join the middle class. Now we're asking the upper classes to decline into the lower class. That's what we're doing. This fashion. This is why there's one of the reasons there's a problem in the mating market is they've made the athlete and the musclehead who makes money. They haven't made anybody that's responsible into a desirable mate. It's actually irresponsible people that are desirable mates. So, I mean,
I see.
So you have this, it's just everywhere. This decline is everywhere. Well, geez,
it's generally understood that this is the case by the people that you would consider to be the responsible people. Recognize this as the problem.
Yes.
And so the issue is is necessary for the responsible people to stand up and take responsibility to institute the changes which will institute responsibility throughout the system. That's the only way that it will work.
Correct.
And so that's it's just a strategy that to achieve that goal is all that is occurring here, which is the purpose of this conversation, which is to discuss the time lengths and functions operations that may be engaged. And it appears to me that people have different time preferences for operations.
Well, we have a lot of guys who are like, just tell me where to show up and who I can put a poke a hole. There's a bunch.
I understand.
Right, and then
ventilate.
right? And then the problem is they need confidence that enough of their kin will show. In other words, their kindred will show.
Right. So it's
Their kith
the
and kin
issue.
will show up.
Yes, this is the issue. Is this is to generate the necessary incentive structure that is understandable and they have confidence in.
Right. So okay. So we keep a list of everybody who's got to be on the list of people who make that call. Right. Brandon and I do strategy. We don't talk about strategy a lot, but Brandon and I do the strategy. So we've got a list of all the people who have to be, and he's made sure he knows how to get a hold of fucking everybody. So the problem is we need the munchkins, right? The Charlie Kirk kids, right? The nutcases, right? All the way up to we need every faction to show up, right? Because we need a couple of million guys. It'll go through the minute that happens. The problem is those guys have to give up. This is what I call the Overton window. They have to give up on their fantasy that we're going to have a fascist state, or that we're going to have a Christian state, or that we're going to kick everybody who isn't white out of the continent. Right? They have to give up on these fantasies and say we need something that's actionable. Right.
So that will be what you do is you just say that's not for now. That fantasy may come to fruition if it becomes eligible to be actualized, but not at this time because we can't afford it.
Difference between progressives and conservatives is you can't make them think about incremental. You can't make them think about keeping it going. They're always come quickly. I mean, it's like the male thing. I want to get in sex and get it, get to my orgasm and get over with. So, sorry, I was trying to get a laugh out of you, but that didn't.
I know. I'm out of coffee.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I'd get somewhere with that gutter response. Anyway, so the problem with conservatives is that they want to go. The right is they want to go.
Action potential.
They have a high action potential. And they want it over with, whereas the left just undermines gradually, incrementally. And so the problem is you can't get to where we want to go in a one hit. Not unless everybody wants to show up and say, oh, I believe, Curt, that this fucking 8 constitutional, changes are necessary and these constitutional, and we can just, they're not going to believe me. They need social proof. Right. So they need their peer group to tell them how to do it. So my view is that,
yes.
Does that make sense? My view has been that we have to have the thing relatively buttoned up in published material so people can review it and so that we can construct a social proof for it. And then we've got to go out there and create enough, as you say, on enough wavelengths. We've got to create enough wavelengths to do it. And the problem is of course that it's very difficult to do that because the only people you can reach through the internet today to take advantage of it are the margins, like the mad rad boys. And turns out they don't show up. They're cowards. You have to get to working class and middle class people. You have to get to those people who are good, moral, producing, participatory pieces of structure that have demonstrated through their success and moderate success in life that they have the ability to stick with something over time, not just show up and ejaculate and try to cause violence. We have to have that because we don't want to have the violence happen. Right. The whole point of showing up with so many people that violence would be unimaginable, that you don't have violence. That's the whole point. Is that the whole point of my trying to solve the problem is so that we don't have a civil war, because I'm confident we're going to have one. I'm even more confident than I was in the 90s, right? I mean, all that's happening is like, oh, well, it's going to happen. Well, I mean,
I won't make you wrong, sir.
Huh?
My goal is to make you wrong.
No, I know that. My goal is to make me wrong too. It's to solve the problem so we don't have to have a civil war. But how does I have a fairly intellectual work product, right? It's on the same. Yes. I copied the founder's strategy, right? A fairly intellectual work product with really practical implementations that would fix everything in every domain of policy and every domain of our lives. It would fix everything I know of that I can find. Because if I haven't got it, it's in there. It's because it's on a draft in some other folder, or it's like I don't know about it, or it's not a real problem that needs to be solved, right? So I mean, I'm fucking annoying, right, in detail. So it's all there. So the question is, can we get people to? You have to have somebody who's an ideologue, right? A communicator. And I'm not that person.
I understand.
Right. And John was one of those people. You need a marketer, right? A pitch guy, and you need a heroic character like a Trump, right? To be able to motivate the people. I don't want to be that guy. I don't even want to be the Jefferson. I'd rather be the Adams. People don't even know what he did.
Right.
Right.
There you have it.
So.
Well, we're working on the plan.
Okay, I gotta pause and get coffee.
That's right. Curt,
Fresh
coffee, but it's polluted. It has little coffee grounds in it because
you know what? They don't hurt you. If you go to Turkey, they have these things called grounds in them.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay. I find it to be roughage. Just have to say it. Because it's unusual to have it in my coffee because the K-cup doesn't usually explode. And
you're obviously too careful with your K-cups.
Apparently.
I have the K-cups you fill yourself, so you have like
the little top came off.
Right, little top come off, and every once in a while it happens. It's like, So take a spoon.
Okay. I'm not used to it yet. I'm a novice at these decorative machines. Okay. Life is good, Curt. We're having fresh coffee. We're having a nice conversation.
Now we're gonna pick up where are we gonna pick up the thing we're just talking about? We're gonna just go back to what we were talking about.
So it's like this. It's like we have. What I want to do is talk about categories of people because they're motivated by different things. People are motivated by different things, and it's like some people are environmentalists, some people are socialists, some people are like I don't know. There's a categorization of people, and I think that they affiliate with one another for common ends, and it's our goal to cause them to come together and recognize the functional reality that everything is related to basic functions of human cooperation, and get them on the same wavelength because it's like everything is a failure of accounting for something, and they're trying to cause accountability to come into question in a political sense. Because it's like if we properly account for everything, then we will be able to cooperate with each other across those domains, right? That's my theory on it. So we don't have to talk about the categorization of groups that are interested.
Well, I mean, I don't. To me, I took the position of, I tried to eliminate falsehood. So I didn't try to satisfy anybody's individual goal. I just went through the Constitution, the code. A nightmare. And really, it wasn't really a nightmare. I couldn't believe how much. It's like you realize the Constitution and all the top 100 Supreme Court cases or so that matter in there. It's not that much stuff, right? Once you science the Constitution like I have, then everything sort of what's missing falls in place, and the logic of everything makes sense. So now you have that, and you're like, okay. Now then you have the federal code, and then you have the state codes. Well, the state codes, you think they vary, but they don't, right? They vary. They vary. We do it this way, they do it
marginal differences.
But the federal code is, and surprisingly, the federal code, except for some shit that came around in the post-war period because the communist issue, that there's some nonsense in there because of that. But in general, the federal code's pretty damn good. You get down into the legislation. The problem is that they've taken too many safeguards out of the system, so that, like, if you're going to put a bunch of regulations in place in a bureaucracy, in a department, that stuff needs to be put before the legislature. So what's happening is we're having this regulatory expansion, as well as having legislative expansion, as well as constitutional limitation expansion, because there's holes in the Constitution, holes in the common law, holes in the Constitution,
Right.
holes in legislation, holes in regulation. So we're having this expansion of this managerial state, which came to America because we got over into Germany and realized how well they did it. We thought we might be able to do it here. Right. And so this is where it comes from. And then we got into the Soviets adopting that, and that got hooked on here. And so we tried to bring in the success of the Soviet Union into America. And this is where all this stuff through Johnson, from Roosevelt through Johnson comes from. It's all shit, right? So and then by the 70s, we figured out, well, communism collapsed, socialism collapsed. Americans are doing it right. And now we have the sort of 80s restoration with Reagan forward. And now we got into Obama, and Clinton was bad, but Obama was worse. And now we're into, who is the president now?
Good question. I think we should leave it open.
I'm not sure he knows.
I'm confident he doesn't know.
And
Like,
you get Trump because whose policy is 100% correct, right? His policies brilliant. He's absolutely right, but he's not exactly Mr. Charming when it comes to politics. So
let's say he does attract some lightning.
So, well, he uses the enemy's technique against them, which infuriates them. So what he does is he antagonizes them on purpose, which gets them to tell his position, and they're being used constantly. And so they hate him. So they attack him for using their technique, because they're the ones who's supposed to accuse you and undermine you and make you look guilty, right? Whereas he turned around and says, I'm accusing you, undermining you, and making you look guilty because you are, right? And of course, the disagreeable right thinks this is fucking hysterical, and it is.
Wait, so I looked at it as this. It's like I don't particularly like Mr. Trump, but I find he makes the right people mad.
It's like I want to bring this up. It's with the vaccine era. It's like, if those people think it's good, it's got to be wrong, right? I mean, if you're a conservative, all you have to know is that the herd is always wrong, and then
That's true.
So, but it was, for me, I just like, well, his policies are right. He especially understood the threat of China, and so that he was successful in the fact that Europe was free riding on us and needed to remilitarize. That was correct and successful, in the sense that we're coming onto an age where it has to be America first, because we can't afford to hold up the international system anymore. He was correct on that. And he couldn't say the truth about the border, which is, we can't afford low IQ people into the plant today, and we absolutely can't plan tomorrow, because they're making jobs decrease for our working class and our laboring class. They're making labor price decrease. And what they're doing is they're not bringing in the talent we need to maintain the smart fraction necessary to compete. Meanwhile, our academies are bringing in foreign students that are generally contributing to maintaining our smart fraction, but they're using diversity, equity, and inclusion to ostracize our white people from the smart fraction, and that squeeze is pretty destructive on the white population from all sides. So Trump was right pretty much in everything, and so we're going to have to fix those problems. Now, did he handle things right? Well, if you're going to deal with Angela Merkel, you can't just tell her more warm fuzzies, because she ends up baiting Putin into conquering Europe, right? So that's Angela Merkel's does that. Well, was he right in how he talked to her? At the time, it didn't seem so, but in retrospect, he was absolutely right. You need to fucking go because you're the problem, and Germany needs to take over its leadership position again. And it's either that or we're gonna go to Poland and make Poland the core of Europe and give our economic favoritism to Poland instead. So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to go to Trump. Why did I go there? I got there because of, you needed somebody like Trump. You needed somebody like that who will say the painful truth. And some of the shit he's saying now is fucking genius. I don't know who. They must have been working. They're working full time on him coming out with
crafting the message is what they're doing. They're getting ready for 24.
You're trying to delay the court prosecution of him until it hits the election cycle. No, they're going to try to prosecute him again, but they're trying to make it wait until
Oh, is that how it is?
Until it's in the election.
Good luck with that. Good luck
with I think that. It's just going to make him more of a martyr, right? I mean, just proving that he's right.
He's going to get a chance to get on a TV is what it is. You don't want to give him a chance to get on TV because it's unavoidable. He'll get on TV and he will make waves that are going to be positive for him. And that's the end of it. There's nobody that can manipulate the media better than he does it. And it's like, if they want a trial, they're going to get what they don't want.
I would not have voted for him again, but it looks like if he runs, there's nobody else up to the current crisis. I mean, we're going to have China, right? The Russian thing, we're going to get the quad against us, right? Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And that block is going to form, just like I predicted it was going to form. I said it was going to form, and that's going to form. And here's what's happening: they're going to try to preserve the agrarian empire method, and we're going to try to preserve the sovereign state federal method, and that war is going to happen.
I hope that you're wrong.
Unless
I think that there will certainly be a threat of a war. The current powers that be in the United States are imperial and not Western, and they want it. And I regard them as enemy. It's occupied. The United States is occupied by enemies of the West. And that's why we see this anti-competency function and anti-meritocracy occurring everywhere that we were discussing earlier.
Well, I think in the intellectual side, you're right. In the government side, I'm not sure. I mean, it looks very pragmatic to me, and I used to have some insight into these things. It's when I say I understand American policy and the guys disagree with me, they're just wrong because they're just ignorant and they don't have any insight into it. But if you look at, how it works, it's exactly what I said. The problem is the people you're talking about ride on top of that policy. In other words, all this bullshit they do about selling democracy instead of rule of law, about woke and about gay rights and all that shit, which is all that stuff makes the world hate us. But it's not
rightfully so,
right? It's not that they'll say that they don't like our policing of the world, except that what happens the minute any of them gets in trouble? Daddy, come protect me. So that's just talk. But their talk about decadence, which is a part of the Jewish left's undermining, right? That's legit. And so so I try to separate these two agendas. One is that there is this evil tribe sitting on top of it that has a lot of influence because they own the talking positions in the economy. They own the talking positions. But if you look at the state military complex, it's just white folk, right? They're just
Yeah, so those people are the right. We're in agreement. So the issue is that I would call them field officers, those people that you're talking about, whereas junior level.
Well, they're not junior level. I mean, you're going to go. I mean, what is his Mark? What's his name? General
Yes, Millie.
He's out there all the time, right? I mean, all of these guys are the same. Those guys are telling the public what I'm telling our guys or you guys, right? This is the U.S. policy. This is the U.S. strategic policy. The problem is the U.S. strategic policy is supposed to not evangelize, right? It's up to the government, the politicians, the talking heads. Our military does. It doesn't lead. Right? Does that make sense? And so what's happening is these talking heads, these media, whatever, they make up shit, and these politicians, and they tell the public, or they tell the foreign press, and which gets to them in the most twisted way possible, their particular take on it, which is always to inspire public support or antagonism.
Yes.
But the military's got a very simple, clear mission, which is to maintain the international rules order, which is, basically where we subsidize the world pattern of finance, transport and trade. We subsidize that by policing the world transport and trade so that everybody has access to free trade instead of pre-war where empires controlled trade. And so you were either the victim or a member of an empire or you were out. And so what happened is, this is why countries were poor, is that they couldn't play in the game, or they were being owned and extracted from by empires. So you got to think of our post-war strategy is no more empires, federations of sovereign states only, who are limited to human and natural rights. That's our strategy. Now, the military does that strategy. Now, you're saying, does it always work out well? I'm not sure Iraq worked out well. Iraq and Afghanistan didn't sure work out well. However, why is that? Because we did it as a policing action, not as a purifying action. Because we actually are practicing what we preach, which is we're trying to create self-determination by self-determined means in sovereign states that federate for mutual trade and defense, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. Does it work? No. Why? Because the Middle East is too primitive still. They need another 200 years, right? Is China ready? Well, China just really became China as we know it in the 1980s. China's not an old country. It's a new one. And so we have to say, okay, well, the China of the 1980s, how much longer are they going to need? They're going to need 100 years. So we try to hurry this process because we feel like we're in a rock and a hard place, because what's happening is, as we're building up the world's economy by this free trade we've created, as we've lifted everyone else of poverty, we're actually driving our middle and working class down to the bottom. We're burning our own people to raise humanity up out of poverty. Has this strategy worked? Absolutely. Have we done it as good? No. Would you rather be colonized by the English or the French? Well, you'd rather be colonized by English, because the French were shitty fucking people. That's why we have, just look at the French colonies versus English colonies. So the answer is, well, you'd rather be. So is a difference between doing the best thing possible poorly with not doing the best thing, anything good at all, or doing it really badly. So you can complain that we've done things badly. You can't complain. You can't look at any empirical evidence and say that the process we've pursued for the past century has not been a great human leap, and that the Pax Americana hasn't been the greatest benefit to the world since the Roman peace. There's no comparison. And why? Because we spread modernity across the world through free trade. We've raised everyone out of it. So I mean,
I think there's a hubristic function that we're talking about. Let's talk about Iraq a little bit, which is the hubristic function of the monopolists that are in charge of the policy of the United States. Falsely believe they can spread democracy throughout the world, and it's just bullshit.
Well, that's not bullshit. Wait, I'm not done. That's an error. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's an error because they're hubristic fools that are running the shop. They believe that their own bullshit too much.
Yes.
And they wish to project it by force too fast upon people that are not ready. And that's the bottom line, is the people that are in charge of policy are problematic, and they have control of the military. And they're using military means to project force to
So what should we have done?
Change faster than they should.
So what should we have done instead of taking out Saddam? What should we have done instead of going into Saddam was because of Kuwait and then his continued resistance, and then Iran has been sponsoring these people, and then we had Afghanistan was providing a safe haven for the terrorists. What should we have done?
But it didn't need to be military. You were in there 20 years. What did you accomplish?
So that's a retrospect, right?
It is.
At the time, what do you think we should do?
Well, I think the entirety of it was a contrivance. Global war on terror was a contrivance.
Why? You mean you're saying that the people at the time didn't think that this was the equivalent of communism taking root, and that the Islamic fundamentalism had a large single unemployed male population that could be turned into the kind of military that it's impossible for our modern militaries to defeat?
I think the error was you're trying to engage them. You just cut them off.
That are you glass?
That's retrospective. Not like I don't like retrospective like that, because it's hypothetical. I'm not what a faultist, right? That's not what I do.
Well, I mean, but the problem is it's really easy to sit there and say people put ideas in people's heads. But we know that that's the geostrategic objective of the United States. We know what they were thinking. They thought that we defeated communism. By design, the Islamic fundamentalists took the communist strategy and they employed it in favor of Islam. We knew that's what they were doing.
Wait. My take on it is this: is truly my historical analysis of it is that the powers that be in the United States and Western world generated a new enemy because the communists failed as an enemy. In order to generate more conflict that they might profit from it. That's my assessment of it. And it's just a conspiratorial understanding of what has actually occurred. And I won't apologize for it. That's my opinion.
Oh, I don't expect, it's not my job. All I can do is I can say that at the time, you're right that the neocons were involved, but the neocons were the party that believed that with the fall of the Soviet Union, we could finish the transition to democracy, and when we overestimated the capacity of the people of the Middle East, and so we had not had this problem. We had success in Vietnam, right? As we turned so everybody we were touching was turning out to be a success, right? Israel was becoming a success. So what's the problem? We have an area where the world's oil supply, because this is before America was oil independent, the oil supply is potentially threatened by this set of 4 axes of conflict in the Middle East. The South, the North, and the Turks, right? And so you have this conflict that's very natural, and that we were afraid that the world would be put into another oil crisis like the 1970s, which was fucking horrible. And so you start looking at this problem, and it's really easy to pick this one thing and moralize about it. But if you understand at the time, there's a portfolio of understandings that existed at the time, and a portfolio of ambitions, and everybody's doing the best they can. And I was easily vulnerable myself to the neocon belief that we'd succeeded in defeating the Soviets, and now it was and we were getting change from the Chinese. The Chinese were coming along. The only bad people left were the Muslims, and so now we had this opportunity to move them, solve not only the threat to oil, but the Muslim problem. And the problem was they came back and they state this with this terrorist action. And they gave us incentive to treat them like we had the communists, which is to go to war against them. And I just thought that at the time it seemed risky, but it seemed rational. Now, if you look at it from today's perspective, it's really easy to create conspiracy narratives. But these people have responsibilities, right? They're trying to keep the world working. They've got this 70s oil crisis. They've got the Tehran stuff in mind. The Tehran capture, right? They've got the Iraqi version of Kuwait in mind, and they've got the 9/11 thing going on, and these people, a lot of them still remember. I mean, I remember when there were bombings every fucking week in America by the communists in the 60s and 70s. I remember that really clearly. It was just like something that happened all the time. So all those people know those things. So you tell them that they should think about, they should go look at the world through the lens of their understanding and their mission. And I think that's just, well, I mean, go back and say it was pretty utopian to think the Muslim world with an average IQ of 85 is going to be able to rapidly, and has a low trust tribal society and has a long history of failed states, is going to be able to do anything close to modernity until they've had enough experience with modernity that they develop middle class. Well, it was optimistic. It was foolishly optimistic, it turns out, but it was optimistic. And what are Americans and Christians? We're stupidly optimistic. It's part of why we're good at what we do.
Well, I look at is that weakness that you just mentioned, stupidly optimistic,
yes,
is recognized by the enemies, and they take advantage of it and
yes.
cause you to engage in behaviors that help them at your expense.
Well, that's exactly what bin Laden did. He said, I'm going to bait them into attacking us, which will cause the Middle East to rise up against them. And he was wrong. We would go over there and we would try to civilize them, and as a consequence, we'd produce the worst outcome, which would just allow them to revert to tribalism. Somebody came after me yesterday and said, how many millions of people died in the Iraq War? I mean, actually, the question is, there were about the Americans and Iraqis who died. It was a fairly small number, but for the size of the war that was. But if you look at the deaths, it's due to the insurgents. And who are the insurgents? They're two different tribes of Muslims with two different sectarian views of the world who committed tribal warfare, and they did it because Iran was sponsoring them to do it. For some reason, which I can't quite grasp, we don't want to go over and just turn Iran into the same shithole that anybody else is. I can't figure out why, to be honest with you, but we don't want to do that. But Israel's probably going to do that. We're probably not going to have to. So Iran is the one who's paying all these insurgents groups to do all this insurgence into Iraq. So were we doing the wrong thing by trying to get rid of a guy who'd done all those horrible things to his people? Well, if he does horrible things to his people and he keeps it to his people, that's fine. But he invaded Kuwait.
And there's an interesting thing about that invasion of Kuwait, and we agree that was I believe he was baited into the hazard of it by the United States, who gave him essentially permission to do it. He told them that he signaled that he was going to do it, and they didn't say don't do it. And then there was diagonal mining or drilling occurring into oil fields in Iraq from the Kuwait side. So they were being antagonized too.
Right. I don't.
And he got some kind of okay from the United States to go to do what he did, and then he got pummeled for it.
I can't say that. I don't know anything about that. If that's true, I'd have to have pretty clear record of that. I know from the U.S. perspective, if you go and protect your border from those kind of crimes, that makes sense. but you to go in there and just slaughter the whole fucking place.
I don't know how. I know there was a lot of propaganda at the time, and I don't know what the reality of such criminality would be.
So,
but I know that they had an actress presiding in the United Nations that was crying about babies in incubators. I know that, and that was a propaganda piece.
I don't doubt that at all. But anyway,
anyway, it's like this.
The difference between the political opera and United States military strategic policy. And I know what that policy is. I know how naughty some of it can be because I've been tangentially involved in some of the naughty. So it's not unbounding. But I'm also tangentially involved in how we run this vast operation that's the military, and why it's so logistically superior. I have pretty clear knowledge of that. So, and it's why you have to have we had to get clearances to do that stuff. So it's not, what they're doing is purely pragmatic. It's in fulfillment of a longstanding policy, and the first person to want to change that policy is Trump, because he said we can't pay for it anymore. It's because it's burning our middle and working classes, and so he's the one, and the whole fucking state fought him on it. And now you have two things, right? Not only do you have the fucking crazy left who's riding on this policy, selling dreams and lies and propaganda, political shit, and the hedonism and degeneracy goes along with it. They're riding on that geostrategic policy, right? They're riding on the cruise ship, right? And they're taking advantage of all the opportunities that this international order has created. And now you've got them, and you've got the military that's like, wait a minute, and the state and the FBI, the whole fucking construct is built to govern the world, and to govern the whole fucking world's pattern of transport, finance, transport, and trade. And all of a sudden he's saying, no, we're done. And all of a sudden you're like, my career is over.
Right.
Or my budgets are over, or he started pulling, he was trying to get people out of, he's trying to pull people out of Europe and end our wars and pull people back, because he's like, this isn't working and it's burning middle class, and the world is either hostile or thankless. In the case of Europe, they're thankless, critical, and
right, free riders.
So that's what he took out. And of course they fought him tooth and nail, which is why this is so this is one of those problems of, if you become an empire, it's hard to not be an empire anymore, because the entrenched bureaucracy of the empire is so interested in self-preservation. This is why civil wars have to happen sometimes, is you have to clean house, because there's no authority anymore to do it, especially if it's including the military. It happened to those fucking Roman, for Christ's sake.
This is interesting that Mr. Trump gave a speech at CPAC like yesterday, I believe, and he specifically said he's going to fire a bunch of bureaucrats.
Yes, he's made that clear. I mean, that's actually the way you do it. You just fire them all and start over. I mean, it's just,
there you have it.
The problem is he's going to do that, and Congress will resist him, and they'll use the courts to resist him. So
they will have court battles about it.
So we'll have to show up.
They will get fired. They'll get fired.
Yes.
And then they can have a court battle.
Right.
And it may take a while.
It's the process. If he tells X and X legal authority, I want you to go arrest these people for violating my orders. In this case, well, Reagan fired the aircraft controllers.
Yes.
Right? So you can do it. I mean, it's not like there's no precedent in history for it.
If worse comes to worse, you send the Marines to arrest the people that need to be arrested if no one else will obey the orders.
The problem is the Marines have to agree to the order, and that's a very hard thing for Marines to do. It might not be hard for the Secret Service to do, but it's pretty hard for the Marines to do.
I understand. I just like this. It's like
what he really needs to do is say, dear men of America, I need your help to show up. I need 10 million of you in Washington, D.C. in 3 days,
They will get it. He would
and they
get
will
it.
get it. And that's what would happen. And then we would get everything. Right?
Scrubbing bubbles. We call that scrubbing bubbles strategy.
Yeah.
You ever watch that? You watched the Hobbit, right? And the remember the name of it?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? The movie, right? The
Yes.
scrubbing bubbles are the green guys that are ghosts. That's them. That's what we're talking about. Those who have an oath to fulfill, right?
Yes.
Those guys will show up and they will scrub.
So I mean, that's it's so funny about the January 6th thing. We know, because we are only so many degrees removed. He knew what he had to say if he wanted a coup.
Yes.
He absolutely positively knew what he had to say if he wanted a coup. He didn't. He wanted to go down with a legacy that he was right and did the right thing. And so he felt that he had that stolen from him. And I'm sure he feels. I don't know what he feels today. At the time, I was pretty sure the election was stolen. I'm sure he was pretty sure the election was stolen. No amount of people telling you that it wasn't stolen will do it.
Right. Any more leftist in my ear squeaking, it's like means I need to go to sleep.
It's like I said with the vaccine. If those people are saying it's true, it's got to be false.
Oh my God. Don't bring the medical establishment in, Curt. It hurts my soul. We're doing good. We've been here for 2 hours now, Curt.
All right, time to close down our conversation.
We can. I would like to speak with you off camera for a minute afterwards. We tell everybody to do this thing here. Click that button, then that button, and then that button if you want to get notifications. Don't forget to leave your wonderful comments. And check the Institute website, because an opportunity exists for you to donate generously.
All right. Love you, man. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, all that stuff, guys. And I hope this was useful.